Please give a very warm welcome to Sienna Saint-Cyr.
When I was a little girl, I loved performing. So my parents enrolled me in this high-end dance studio where I did ballet and tap and gymnastics. And I'll never forget the first time that I went on stage, feeling the lights, seeing all the people in the audience, and these were big audiences because these theaters held anywhere from 500 to 1,000 people. And I loved the little girls next to me. We all had tutus on and sequins. And I would have this little tickle in my stomach every time I went up to perform. One day, I was telling my great-grandmother about these tickles in my stomach, and she said, "Oh, those are your butterflies. And your butterflies need to be fed. And you feed them every time you get up and perform." So I performed a lot. And considering that I was in all of these different things in one studio, I performed every single performance that I could. One day we moved, and we were too far away from the dance studio, so I was not able to continue on this path of dancing. So instead, I set up a makeshift stage in my front yard and started performing for my neighbors. It was a small audience, maybe 10 people. But for me, they were watching me, so that was an audience. And it did slightly a good job for feeding my butterflies. Now, this next part is hard for me to talk about because around 6 years old, I was sex trafficked. Yes. So the next time I was in front of 10, 15 people, I was still lined up with a bunch of little girls, but we didn't have sequins, we didn't have tutus, we were naked. And the people that were there, they were there to purchase. There were 3 things taken from me that day. Because that day, when I stood in front of everyone, all I felt in my stomach was nails. Everything was cold. There was nothing happy. And I just pictured those nails shredding all of my butterflies into tiny little pieces. The 3 things that they took from me were my power, especially my sexual power. They took my ability to be touched, because from that day forward, touch was painful. And they took my butterflies. So as I got older, I suppressed a lot of this. The abuse didn't carry on into my teen years. So I tried to get on stage again. I tried drama club, I tried singing, I even tried just giving book reports and things like that. And I would get up in front of people, and all I would feel were those nails, constantly scraping inside my stomach. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't perform. I couldn't even hardly give a book report. Eventually, in my adult years, I started therapy. And one of the first things that my therapist realized about me was that I do very well with exposure therapy. So what that looks like for me is using something called fear ladders. And how fear ladders work is that if I have a fear that I want to face, I start with something simple, and I talk about it, and that's at the bottom of the ladder. And then maybe I write about it, since I'm a writer. That's the next step up. And then maybe I watch somebody doing something until finally I get to the very top, and I face that fear. So I started doing this, but there was a few areas where I had not found that healing because I couldn't actually face those fears. I tried, but I was always doing it in a circumstance where I was in control. And it dawned on me one day that part of the problem was that I was in control. And when I lost those three things, I was not in control. So I talked to my therapist and my husband, because I had always had an interest in BDSM. And I was like, I think maybe if I hand over my control and then work on these things, that's going to give me the healing that I need. And they agreed. As long as it was done safely, with a person I could trust, then to go forward with it. So I talked to my husband again, and he wasn't really interested in being my dominant and having me submit to him. So I started looking for a dom because we have an open marriage, and that was something that was available. And eventually I found someone, and he took me on and had experience with trauma to boot, so it was perfect. And one of the things that I wanted to work on was to be able to be in front of people again, whether that was an audience of 10 in a kink scenario or an audience of, 400, whatever is in this audience. And so we started working toward that goal, and one of the things at the bottom of the fear ladder was obviously to talk, fantasize about being put on display somewhere, or at a party, at a kink party, or maybe be humiliated on stage. And, these things are very exciting. And then one of our in-person meetings, he had told me, if I tell you to open your mouth, you open your mouth and you leave it open until I tell you to close it. Now, when it wasn't in a public setting, this didn't seem like that big of a thing, right? It was a little awkward, but it wasn't a thing. And then we're walking around town one day on kind of a crowded city street. And he turns to me and whispers, "Open." And two things happen in this moment. My heart started pounding because I'm thinking, oh shit, who is looking at me right now? And my mouth opened at the same time. So I'm standing there like this on the street. And at first, I'm completely humiliated. Like, I can feel the heat rising in my cheeks. My heart continues to pound. And then eventually, something interesting happened. I started to feel a tingle between my legs. And then that tingle got stronger, and I kind of felt myself squirming, and I realized I kind of like this. And then I felt the slightest flutter of a butterfly wing. So I knew that this was going to work. I really felt it was. So we kept moving up the ladder, and I went to a few kink parties. No play, just attended. That was sort of the next step. And then eventually I went to a party with my husband, of all people, because he had not been to any of these kink parties, and he was starting to realize, hey, this is a good thing for my wife, this is great. So we went to a kink party, and I was with him, introducing him to people, and I did not expect anything to happen, because naturally I'm there with my husband, but my dom is also there. And I see him talking to another gal and don't know what they're talking about, and I'm introducing my husband around, and then the next thing I know, my dom is walking up to me and my husband, and he's got this gal with him, and he's like, she would like to see what submission looks like. And I was like, okay. And I'm looking at my husband, waiting for his seal of approval, because he was the priority in that moment. And my husband was like, yeah, I'd kind of like to see this too. So we agree that this is going to happen, and we go down to the dungeon, and I can kind of feel my heart racing again, and starting to feel a little tingle of excitement as I'm walking to the dungeon. And then as I get there, he tells me to sit down on a table. So I'm obedient, sit down at the table. I'm waiting patiently. And this is when I notice that there's a lot of people in the room. Not just my husband and these two other people. In fact, as I'm watching, I'm losing count. But it was okay, because as my dom started to walk toward me, I started to drop into subspace. So for those of you who don't know what that is, for me, subspace is this wonderful spiritual place that I go when I'm submitting. All the nasty voices in my head go quiet. I don't have to worry about the bills that need to be paid. Don't have to worry about my PTSD. Everything is just quiet and safe. So I'm dropping into subspace as he's walking toward me. And I can already see his stance getting taller, and I'm like, and then the gal's walking, and my husband's coming in, and then other people start coming in. Because one of the things that this one wants to see is how my pupils dilate when I drop into subspace. So I had people very, very close to me by this point. And then my dom puts his hand on my cheek. And I know what's coming. He's going to slap me. And that just completely, just thinking about it gives me the tingles. So I'm really excited by this point, and I'm kind of not caring. The people are starting to blur. And then he slaps me a couple times, and I drop further. And the woman, I can kind of hear them talking, and she's like, oh yeah, look at her pupils. They really are dilating. And other people are coming in, and they're looking at my eyes, and I'm just trying desperately to keep them open, because when I'm dropping, I close my eyes. So it was a tough thing to do. And then he starts counting down. Now what this means for me is when he gets to 0 and tells me to come, I have an orgasm because I am able to come on command. So he starts out at 10, and instantly my hips are moving because I'm like, I know it's coming, and it's me. And then he counts down further and further, and the lower the number, the more I'm dropping. So I'm dropping this whole time. Until he finally gets to 0, and he tells me to come. And at that point, I was totally on. I was coming my brains out, and mind you, I am fully clothed. This is not even a physical thing, it's just instruction. So I'm coming my brains out, and everything in the room is a complete blur. I have no idea how many people are in the room by this point. I still don't. No clue. And in the middle of coming, as everyone's I can hear the whispers and talking about it, he pushes me down on this couch next to me and tells me to come again. And I'm coming so much that I kind of only vaguely hear him saying, you may touch her. And then I hear him telling me, every time someone touches you, you're gonna come harder. And so all these people are gathering around me, and they're touching me, and the craziest thing happened. It felt good. Not only did it make me come harder, but the razors that I used to feel every time someone touched me, they just went away. So I was coming, being touched, feeling great. I had an audience. All of this wonderful stuff was happening. And eventually he says, okay, that's enough. And he pulls me up and lets me calm down. And then he whispers to me, I'm proud of you. And everything inside just melted. Because of what happened, because I was able to submit and come in front of all those people and be touched, that night I gained back my power, and more importantly, my sexual power. I gained back my ability to be touched. And now tonight, as I stand in front of all of you sharing this story, I have my butterflies back. Thank you.